Greetings, everyone. Welcome to National Security Institute of the State Department that is being hosted by the University of Delaware. I'm Muqtada Khan. I'm a professor at the University of Delaware, and today I'm talking with Dr. Hynek Melichar, who's a lecturer in Palacky University in the Czech Republic. He teaches international relations and international security, and we are going to talk about Europe, NATO, Russia, and terrorism.
We like to say that we are Central European because we culturally have always been close to the West, right? But because of the Soviet influence during the Cold War era and because of the communist government being part of the Eastern Bloc, of course, a lot of people still associate Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, Poland with Eastern Europe. Right, there's been a lot of essays written about what Central Europe is and why it's so special, that it's something in between the West and the East. But historically, there were always close ties to Germany. We were part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire as well. So we like to use the term Central Europe to demarcate us on the map of Europe. Also geographically, if you look at a simple geographic map of Europe, the Czech Republic is really in the middle. Well, there are many interpretations of what is Central Europe, based on religious, historical, even boundary reasons. Central Europe is the countries in between the West and the East. There is also an economic interpretation for that, because all the major industrial revolutions, economic revolutions started in the West. They kind of traveled, metaphorically speaking, to the East. So they reached the center somehow, but they never reached Eastern Europe. And of course, you have the religious explanation, the Orthodox civilization, or however you want to call it, and of course the Catholic one. We can go as far back to history as the collapse of the Roman Empire and the Western and Eastern Roman empires. But historically, we have always been looking to the West for inspiration, for everything. Beginning with architecture, art, and everything, to the tradition of democracy we have in former Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic. This is all something that really ties us closer to the West and to the East. Of course, ethnically, we are a Slavic nation. A long time ago, the Czechs as a tribe came somewhere from mid-Russia to the present
So you're saying
territory.
ethnically we are Easterners, geographically we are Central, and politically we are Westerners.
Culturally, we are also Westerners.
Okay.
And also, politically, we are now Westerners again. Like we used to be after 1918, when first independent Czechoslovak Republic had been established, of course, under the principle of self-determination coined by the US President Woodrow Wilson. Okay. So there was a strong US influence, actually, at the establishment.
So for 50 years you were part of the West before that?
Well, for 20 years, because our history is kind of turbulent and problematic. Then the Nazis came, and then we had like 2 years of democracy. And then the communist government took power, and the Soviet tanks came in 1968. So it's only since 1989 when we are politically again on the map of Western Europe. Actually, I would say it's a combination of the two, right? I would say that NATO has never been that actual since the end of the Cold War as it is now. But at the same time, we have the new US president talking about NATO being obsolete. Yeah? A lot of people are now discussing the Russian threat. We can, of course, discuss how grave the threat is, but there is no doubt that Russia under Putin's leadership under Putin's authoritarian leadership is breaking international law, and that Putin is doing everything to secure Russian vital interests in the near abroad, even at the cost of breaking international law. So, for the Czech Republic itself, I don't see Russia as an imminent threat right now. Of course, we are still behind Ukraine and the Baltic states and the Russian near abroad. But this doesn't mean that Russia doesn't care about the Czech Republic at all, especially in terms of what's sometimes called hybrid warfare, or the non-military style of hybrid warfare, which is using propaganda to influence the general public. That's happening. We have several pro-Russian servers and media which are trying to influence public opinion in the Czech Republic. According to Czech intelligence, they're actually quite successful in doing that, providing the Russian interpretation. I wouldn't say that the general public opinion in the Czech Republic is pro-Russian or pro-Putin. On the contrary, we had a survey 2 years ago in 2015, which clearly showed that people fear Russia, that they perceive it as a threat. It was not a decisive majority, but it was a majority. And also more than 70% actually fear that Vladimir Putin is a threat by himself, or Russia under Vladimir Putin's leadership. So Czech Republic still is oriented westwards, still is a member of NATO, still is a close ally of the United States. However, the general public is somehow split in two, and this is happening in many other countries. There is not this kind of unanimous consensus we used to have shortly after the Velvet Revolution, when we were rushing back to Europe, to NATO also as soon as possible. We have a president who openly expresses pro-Russian opinions or stances, even pro-Chinese as well. And the general public is somehow divided. Some people still see Russia, of course, based on the historical experience with Soviet Union, as a severe threat. They still remember Soviet troops being stationed in a country for 20 years. And there are people who are saying, actually, we should cooperate with Putin. He's not a big threat. It's maybe even the Americans who are enlarging NATO, who are provoking Putin. But NATO, after all, is a collective defense organization. By stationing troops in Poland, it doesn't mean that the United States are going to attack Russia. These are still all defensive measures. But on the other hand, the important thing is how Russia perceives these steps. For Russia, stationing of US troops in Poland is basically an act of aggression or provocation.
Provocation, definitely. Yeah. I mean, the very idea of expanding NATO eastwards would be seen as threat by any country that is east of NATO, isn't it? Especially if it is not invited to join NATO. If you invite Russia to join NATO, then that's a different...
It's partly true, yeah. Many thinkers in the field of international relations actually warn that enlarging NATO eastwards will bring Russia into international isolation, that it will bring some authoritarian politicians to power. This all happened, that's right. But on the other hand, all NATO member countries are there based on their free will. Nobody forced them to join the alliance. It was their democratic decision to join the alliance. So
because benefits.
Of course, yeah. The Baltic states wanted to join, Central European or some Eastern European states wanted to join. It was their free democratic will to do so. I think we still need to wait a little bit, because no one actually knows precisely what's going to happen with Trump's presidency. On one hand, just before he was inaugurated, he had talked about NATO being obsolete. But now, after speaking to Theresa May of Great Britain, she said that he was talking about the importance of NATO and the importance of transatlantic ties. So he is sometimes contradicting himself. So I would be patient. I would wait what he will really do in this matter. Of course, his call to Vladimir Putin, today's first official call, might be seen a bit dangerous. And of course, his speaking about lifting of sanctions, which would basically mean making the annexation of Crimea legitimate. Yeah. So we have to wait what's going to be his next political step towards Russia and towards NATO. Let's not rush into some catastrophic conclusions. And I strongly believe that NATO will survive. Again, the public opinion is split. Some people would say, of course, it's an illegitimate, illegal act which is breaching international law and which is clearly showing how Russia behaves under Putin, that it fears nothing, that it will break international law anytime it would need to secure its vital interests. And on the other hand, you also have people who are talking about the historical right of Russia to Crimea, that this has always been part of Russia and it's only natural that they claimed it back once Ukraine expressed the wish to join the European Union or potentially NATO. Well, first of all, Czech Republic is a relatively small country with now quite a favorable geopolitical position, which is ironic because during history we have always had the same position, but it was a very unfavorable geopolitical position between Germany and Russia. Yeah, that's what largely modeled the history of Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic, Czech lands. But now we are members of both the EU and NATO. We are, I think, the 6th safest country in the world. So we don't feel an immediate threat at the moment. Mm-hmm. But still, we have recently updated our national security strategy in 2015 to reflect more actual threats, especially in the area of cyber-terrorism. And even though there is no specific mention of any country in the security strategy, it's pretty clear against which country these provisions are aimed. And so it will be Russia, it will be cyber security, it will be international terrorism, Islamist terrorism, and also the problems connected with the refugee crisis and the influx of refugees. These are the most actual
Why
problems.
Would Czech Republic be concerned about terrorism coming from ISIS or Al-Qaeda?
Well, on one hand, of course, Czech Republic is not an attractive target. That's true. Maybe Prague, okay. But on the other hand, Czech Republic is listed on the list of enemies of ISIS. Okay. It's among those countries, so we are, of course, a potential target of Islamist terrorists. There's no doubt about that. And this also largely shapes public opinion on the whole refugee issues, on Muslims, on Islam as such, on Islamists. So we have a very tiny Muslim community in our country, which is a few thousand people. We are ethnically very homogeneous country, mm-hmm. and people are actually scared of newcomers, of immigrants, of refugees. And they are, of course, somehow naturally connecting this with the wave of Islamist terrorism. Yeah, we can discuss whether there is any connection, but again, seeing or listening to general public opinion, this is the case. I think it's not really that much about Islam as such, but about refugees and maybe this connection some people make between the refugee crisis and, of course, Islamist terrorism. But I think the dissatisfaction is economically and security motivated. And I think that the reason might be the inability of the liberal system, in the eyes of some people, to deal with these issues. That actually liberal people are more welcoming, but the people want to hear something more like a strong hand rule. We will do something with the refugee crisis. We will stop it. We will not let any other refugee there. The EU has proven to be completely inefficient in dealing with the refugee crisis. So we need to handle this by ourselves. So I would see this kind of connection there. That it might be the view of some people that the liberal democracy isn't always the best option how to deal with certain issues.
But if you remember the original German invitation to the refugees, a lot of people argued that the reason why Germany was so eager to take up to 1 million refugees from Syria was because it did need labor for its economy and for its industry. So isn't it that the demographic nature of Europe itself is making producing economic reasons for migration rather than, say, a fear of cultural heterogeneity or diversity?
Well, we need to differentiate these two things. Of course, the demographic trends are pretty clear. European birth rates are very low.
Yes.
And there will be a lot of workforce needed from other countries. And there has always been migration from other countries. This is nothing new. What's new about this current refugee crisis is the extent of it. But continuous migration, work-related migration to Europe is nothing new. It's here for decades. So this is one thing. But the other thing is the common people's view of the current refugee crisis. They don't see the refugees or migrants, or because of course not all of them are refugees. Some are really economic migrants from Afghanistan, from even from North Africa, of course. They see them rather as potential terrorists, I would say, rather than a needed workforce. I would say that for some people it's really difficult to actually accept the fact that the demographic trends in Europe are the way they are, and that the migration is actually needed. They fear that the European identity is threatened and everything. But the extent of the current crisis, the omnipresent media picture of Islamists, terrorists raging everywhere, this is what I think is shaping the mind of many Europeans at the present.
I think it's a complex problem, and clearly there are no simple solutions, and we shall see how things unfold. Thank you very much, Professor Melichar, and
Thank you.
I wish you all the best. Thank you.